Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin. In today's video, we have a lot. Part show and tell, part holiday sewing, part fabric pull, part tutorial, and maybe a little bit of part free pattern. And so as you might imagine, I have a lot to say about it. So we better get started. I like variety. If you haven't noticed that about me, I really like variety. And so we use we rotate between 6 throw pillows in our living room throughout the course of the year. There's this one that is kind of the home base. And let me tell you, you can tell it has been very loved and is starting to show. There's this one, which is kind of my late fall, early winter, and looks handmade, but was actually a really inexpensive purchase from At Home. There's this one, which is a pillow cover that I made for Christmas. Love it. There's this one, which may be my favorite. It's the fuzziest and softest, but also, unfortunately, the most drab. And so it stays on our couch in the wintertime. There's this one, which was a $1 find at the thrift store. It's one of my favorites, but it's kind of in the bleak midwinter. It's like winter turning spring. And then there's this one, which is my linen MCM, and no, not my initials, mid-century modern pillowcase that I made with a shirt back and I put in a zipper. And that's it. Those are the pillows. And usually I just have the one pillow on one side of the couch, a stack of quilts on the other works for me. And the other day I was realizing that we're fully into fall here in America, despite the fact that Alabama did not get the memo about the temperature change. Since the high today is 80 degrees, I'm ready for something new. I'm ready for fall. I'm ready for the leaves changing. I'm ready for football. I'm ready for the temperature change. I'm ready for all of it. I'm ready for holiday sewing. It's that time of year where we start doing Christmas projects and Halloween projects and redecorating the house 3 times in 3 months for all of the things. And there just feels like there's a gap there in the throw pillow offerings. And it seems, even though the temperature is right for linen, having a linen pillow on my couch in October just feels wrong to me. So I had this idea, I'll just make a fall throw pillow. Instead of working on my whips that I should be working on and progressing on, I got out my orange and yellow and red fabric totes and started coming up with a plan. The upside of using shirt fabrics or fabric that you have gleaned from shirts and other sundries at the thrift store is a lot of times we end up with a lot more fabric than we anticipated, i.e. a solid yard of fabric from a shirt that cost $4.99 or $7 or whatever your prices are. And so as a result, I have a lot of these kind of autumnal colors still in my orange and yellow and red fabric basket. And if you have already noticed the quilt behind me, you can tell I'm really trying to get the fall vibe going. You will see these same fabrics in the quilt behind me because I just still have so much of that fabric in my stash. So I started pulling out these fabrics and just, kind of things that are in the, pumpkin family, perhaps. So what I thought my plan was going to be was to get a whole bunch of oranges and yellows and do like a color wash with all the squares kind of mixed in together, a la pumpkin, pumpkin something. Actually, very much like Stacey Lee Creative's pumpkin pot holder, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that, super cute. And so I started pulling out the oranges, and in my orange and yellow fabric bin are these Kaffe remnants. And as I was kind of rooting through, Paul passed through and saw this one and said, wow, that is very autumnal. That is very autumnal for Kaffe. And I was like, it is. And so, of course, then here we go. So I got out the ones that seem to kind of go together. This chevron, which I am truly not a fan of. I like a lot of the other stuff. That one I'm just not a big fan of. And I had this idea that what I would do is take my solid shirt pieces and surround them with Kaffe fabric like this. Normally I isolate the Kaffe. I try to control the muchness. It's a lot. And so I usually try to isolate it with the solid around it. But I thought, oh, this time it could be really fun if I do the Kaffe around the solid fabric. And so I kind of laid that out and immediately was like, nope, too much. Whew, too vibrant, too busy, too much. Now, some of you love that, and that is great, and there's nothing wrong with that. Please do not hear me say that. Just for my very understated mid-century / Danish modern living room, this was not going to do the trick. So then I had the idea that maybe what I would do is do like for example, like a row or a diagonal of yellow squares, and then a diagonal of the Kaffe squares, and then another diagonal of orange, and then another Kaffe. I'm convinced that could still be pretty. However, it still felt a little too contrasty, I think is the word that I will use for that. So vibrant. I just was afraid it would end up looking really like right on the line of garish because the yellows and oranges are so bright, and the matching Kaffe fabrics are so bright. I just thought, I don't know. So I was getting ready to abandon the idea altogether. And I thought, let me just lay them out. So I nixed the chevron because I'm not a fan. And then I nixed Jupiter. I think it's Jupiter. I started to say, or is it Saturn? I nixed Jupiter because it had a little too much purple and a little too much green for me. And so I got rid of those and ended up just with this one stretch of the chrysanthemums, which is by far my favorite of the Kaffe fabrics in that grouping. And I just started kind of laying out the fabrics that I had chosen. And I realized as I was doing it, like, oh, well, that's really pretty. This happens with me. If I ever get to the place where I just don't know what to do next, I wish someone would just say, get your fabric out. Play with your fabric, because it gives me life. It just absolutely energizes me and gives me ideas. And so I stood at my cutting mat at my table and just literally tried on fabric, not on me, but on the table, just back and forth. Does this work? Does this work? Does this work? And this was what I ended up with as my final choice. And it was a little bit surprising. You can see this is a gradient, kind of working from that. I always struggle with this color. This is like brown mustard. This is, I can't remember if it's ochre. I think it's ochre. It's one of those colors in the crayon box that you did not use as a kid, and you thought, this is the ugliest color I've ever seen. It was always in pristine condition. You know, the other ones are worn down to a nub. So whatever color that is, that. And then this brown mustard, and then this kind of mix of those two colors together. This is Thatched by Lori Holt, and I love that. And I got to right here, and I normally would go red next because this is that red-orange or orange-red. Vermilion. It really is just a very strong orange. And I put the red next to it and was like, I don't like it. And then I pulled out the Kaffe strip again and realized it's really, in one part, it's like wine. And in the other part, it's kind of a brick color. And so I started rooting through the red fabric bin and ended up with this, which is like a cranberry / brick. And it seems to actually bridge perfectly between the brick and the wine, Bordeaux, whatever color this is. I feel like I need to start naming all the red. Chianti. I'm not sure which one it is. But anyway, it's right there in between. And I got to right there and went, oh, that is so lovely. Just like that. Just like that. But then I was trying to imagine a throw pillow. I briefly threw around the idea of, and I had these in strips. You can tell I have now made it. So there are all these pieces that I could strip sew them together like this, and then cut them and scoot it over the one bar, and again to kind of make that like a trip around the world style, where each color shifts one block and it kind of creates that diagonal. I still might do that for another throw pillow. It felt like, as I was thinking it through, that it would kind of busy it up in a way that was not necessary. The beauty to me of this was just, it really does just feel like fall foliage, almost in the order that it happens. Although in real life, these would be green, and then it turns yellow, and then orange, and then red somewhere in here. And then it gets kind of this burgundy and then turns, brown and falls to the ground. But it just really, this just encapsulated fall foliage for me and the feelings of fall. And I thought, okay, what can I do with that? How can I make that a little bit more interesting than just that? Which honestly, I really, really could just get this many more strips and make a pillow just in that gradient order. But instead, I thought, what if it went from this color to this cranberry and back again? Kind of like Frodo and Bilbo Baggins. There and back again. And so I decided to just go with that idea. And so let me get the finished pillow out, and I want to show you what that looks like. And then I want to talk about kind of some of the challenges. I did do it as a quilt as you go, because I really didn't want to commit to sewing the whole quilt top and then needing to quilt it and so on and so forth. But let me get it out and I'll show you. So here we are with the finished pillow cover, and it is roughly 12.5 by 18.5. It's probably closer to 12 by 18 because I don't know why I do that. But anyway, so clearly I decided to go from this gradient into the dark and then back again. And as I was laying it out on my table, I had to decide what size pillow I wanted. And what I have found is at least 2 of my 6 pillows are a little big, actually. So our couch is a vintage MCM minimalist style, and it doesn't have a very deep seat on it. And so at least 2 of the pillows behind me really end up taking too much space on the couch when I want to sit in that spot. So I thought, well, maybe the thing to do is make like a lumbar pillow size pillow. And isn't that always tricky? It's like when you decide to make something creatively, you get the spark, and then it's like, oh, wait, how am I going to use this? how big do I want this to be? So I decided on the 12 by 18, which is the size pillow that I bought. And then of course with seam allowance comes out to be 12.5 by 18.5. If you do your seam allowance right. You know, I had figured out my fabrics. If I did each one the same size, then all of a sudden now it's too big for the 12 by 18. And I wanted there to be that central piece that anchored the rest of the design, because it's coming to that center. And if it was just a narrow little strip, it would still look fine, but I wanted it to have that, oh, there's a purpose here, like a central ribbon that anchors all the rest. I literally just tried to figure out the math. And the plan was, which it mostly came together, that it would start with the skinniest strips on the end and then just get bigger by 1/4 of an inch with each 2 strips. So these were intended to be 3/4 of an inch, these two. These two would be an inch. These would be an inch and 1/4. And then this one would be an inch and a half, and then this central piece would be 3 inches, meaning 2 1.5 inch pieces together, if that makes sense. And so adding in seam allowances and all that stuff, which we can put that in the description box for you if you're interested. Got the whole thing planned out and realized I had forgotten to factor in the binding portion of the 2 end pieces, which if that is not me to a T, I don't know what is. So if you're noticing that this last piece does not actually match up with this second piece, that's why. But I am happy with it in the end. What I did notice, and I forget this every time, I have just about gotten a handle on my 1/4 inch seam with my 1/4 inch presser foot, and then sometimes with additional assistance from the seam allowance tape. And that's great. But when you do Quilt as you go, as you may know, it really works a little better with the walking foot because it is pulling the essentially quilt top, batting, and backing together through at one time. And so just exactly like I was quilting a quilt, I was going to be doing the same for the front of my throw pillow. So I started off using my regular presser foot and realized that it was going to distort the pieces. So this piece has a nice happy scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I put the walking foot on here, and my scant 1/4 inch seam allowance was not only not scant, it was also not a 1/4 inch. It's kind of a fat 1/4 inch. And so what that did is that kind of adjusted everything else as a result. So have not measured it actually now that I'm sitting here on camera talking about it, but that's why the end result was a little bit different than I anticipated. So if you decide after watching this video, ooh, I'd like to do something similar, just know that if you switch over to your walking foot, it may change out the dimensions unless you're just to have a much better handle on your 1/4 inch seam allowance than I do. But that's how this came to be. And I want to show you, I have a little practicey piece, how I did this particular arrangement and one little twist that I did. So what I have here is the cutoff from this piece. So I have my backing fabric, which is just a white sheet that I picked up from the thrift store that has given me so much mileage. It's ridiculous. It's kind of thick. And then this is a offcut piece of batting that I had left over from a quilt. It happens to be bamboo, but you could use any kind. And in fact, if I had to do it again and I had some 80/20 or polyester batting, I probably would use it. This does not have a very high loft. And so when you quilt with it or quilt as you go with it, it's not really evident that it has been quilted because it doesn't have a very high loft, which maybe you like that, maybe you don't like that. But if I wanted the grooves to show a little bit more, then I could use an 80/20 or something with a higher loft, or wool, or whatever, batting of choice. Maybe that's what we should say, batting of choice. And so I laid these two out. I actually did the test that several people suggested on the glue basting video, which is to use a glue stick. So I did a little glue stick all throughout the backing, and then pressed it with my hands, and then turned it over and hit it with a hot, dry iron. It did work. I got to tell you, didn't love it. For once in my life, I was so judicious with my glue stick basting that I may not have actually put enough. Shocker, but it's true. So put those two together, and then you start off with your very first strip and just seam it straight down the edge to anchor that one piece. And then from there, it's kind of off and running. And so in this case, I used this one, and you just turn it over. And this is, again, should have started with the walking foot, did not do so. And then use your walking foot to stitch that down. And then it gets folded back like this, and you press that, and then so on and so on and so on. So that gets seamed down, it's folded over and pressed. And that's the way that goes. And that's exactly what I did. And I got to about maybe in the yellow and realized that what I like about Quilt As You Go, besides the fact that it's just easy and very simple and plain, is there's a sense in which you can tell the way it was folded. So you don't see the quilting seam because it's underneath the fold, but you get that little bit of a lift everywhere that the seam is folded over. And if I continue to do that across the entire piece, essentially each piece is on top of the one before it, and it would create a very subtle louvered effect, just like blinds. One is on top of the other, and they're just literally stacked like dominoes that have fallen. And it's very subtle. Let me just say this, we're talking about a very, very subtle difference. Here's just flat. This is just a, laying flat down. And you can see with this one right beside it that there is that quilted feel. And this is why I made the statement about the loft. If it had had a higher loft, you would feel the quilted portion of it even more. So it's not a flat surface. It's got that, lump and rise from the quilting. So I had this idea because I didn't want it to just be that louvered effect. I wanted it to be more like stacked. So each fabric is on top of the other to the center, and I wanted the other side to echo that same process. So again, I would be working from this side, and then this piece, and then that thatched piece, so that the lowest pieces are the two ends, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next, and ending with the cranberry piece on the top. So when I got to this place, so I did each piece just along, just like I described, and then got to the cranberry one. I've never said cranberry so many times in a video. So I stitched this down and then folded it back. And then I measured from this very edge to the center of this red piece. And assuming that I could maintain a consistent seam allowance, then I took my measuring tape or my ruler and stretched it to the other side and measured from the middle of the cranberry to the end and drew a line. And then that's how I knew how to work from here back. And then when I got to this little section where it does that last orange to cranberry, so this side was stitched down, I folded this back, made a crease, and pressed my 1/4 inch seam allowance down, folded it back, and then top stitched it down. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to get to the hidden stitch. I did a top stitch and then did a mirrored top stitch on the same side, and then did that on the other side. And so I'm going to show you that here. So see, you can hear, or see, you can hear. So here you can see this was the original stretch. This has a hidden seam underneath. Then this was folded under and top stitched down. So you can see that lip there. And then I went back and top stitched on the other side to kind of mimic what's happening here. And the thought there is that it would have just this most subtle sense of this came last, rather than one to the next, to the next, to the next. Because otherwise, this orange would have been the lip over the cranberry. So that's the way I went. Paul just pointed out to me, and he's absolutely right. If I had known in advance, I could have stitched this twice as long and then cut it and then just laid that down and done it that way. And just the only thing that would have been attached would have been the cranberry, and I could have pressed under both sides and done it down. I didn't do it that way. That would have made a lot of sense. Spatial relations, it's not my gift. But as you can tell, I never abandoned the Kaffe fabric because honestly, it was the inspiration for the color palette. And I thought, oh gosh, I wonder how that will look up against these colors. And so you can see how it looks. Now, I will confess to you that I feel so conflicted about this binding. I love it. I wouldn't say I hate it. I love it. And then I also think, wow, it is something. I don't know what the something is. I do think it ties it all in and gives it a point of real interest and excitement. But because I tend toward the minimalism feeling and style, it does make the binding the focus of attention. So I could have done this a variety of ways. I could have just done the gradient and made the pillow cover as a turned. So where the backing is sewn to the quilted part, right sides together, and then turned inside out. So it would have had no binding and would have just been turned. And actually, a few of the pillows that I own are like that. There's no ribbing or piping or binding of any kind. So I could have done that. And if I had done that, it definitely would be more understated. And that's the part that I like, But then I also think, what a celebration of autumn. I mean, it is autumnal. And our couch is kind of a medium blue. So these little bits and pieces of blue throughout kind of tie in. And if you're wondering what the back is, I decided to stay with the cranberry color. And I do think that there will be times that I will probably put that side out. So this side to the couch and this side facing out. I like this a lot because I feel like if I want something not quite as in my face as the vibrant fall foliage, then I have this, brick cranberry, but there's just still that interest along the edge. I did use a shirt for my envelope backing. I did not have the interest, time, energy, any of that to do a zip this time. I just decided I wanted to do an envelope backing and call it a day. I did have to piece it together, but I actually kind of liked it because I used the button placket on both parts of the envelope. And then when I added this extra little stretch, it just kind of makes it work to me. Some of these creases will probably wash out. That line of light will not. And I find that interesting and amusing. So that's the end of the story, the fabric pull, the tutorial. If you are interested, again, it really is so easy from the standpoint of dimensions. These are 3/4 inch finished. This is an inch finished. This is an 1 1/4 inch finished. This last group of orange is 1.5 inches, and then the middle is 3 inches finished. So you can add your little seam allowances if you want to do this. I would encourage you, if you think you like this or anything even remotely like it, like I can totally see doing this with Christmas colors. So you could do red into green or green into red and have a holiday pillow. I might actually do that now that I think about it. If you do it, this looks so the right size on my table. And once I put the pillow form in it, I was surprised at how small it was. So it looked a little dinky, actually, on my couch. I think if I had to do it again, I might make it even bigger. Or maybe this is just an excuse for me to make the orange and pumpkin color wash pillow to go with it, so it doesn't look so lonely by itself on my minimal couch. But anyway, so that's our throw pillow holiday sewing. And here we are. We're right here at the time of fall festivals and Thanksgiving coming up. Seems like there's events every week and right up until Christmas. So if you're looking for a fun, quick and easy quilt as you go, spruce up for your couch, just like I did mine, let me encourage you, just get out your fabric and play. The inspiration will come. I'm Kaffe Martin. This is the Catbird Quilts. Thank you so much for watching.